laptop.
Nice. Well, thank you, Melissa. And so, yeah, today we're in the Photo Tips Monthly. We're going to be talking about portrait planning and more on the mindset. What do we need to do to make this happen? And then we'll move into a few of posing thoughts. We'll move into a few different tools to use, lenses and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I want to be where is my mind when I am photographing someone? What am I thinking about? What are the steps involved in getting this thing even going? Because any photographer can show up and press the button. That's easy. I mean, you've got a cell phone. You can press the button. That part's easy. But what goes into it? What are the thought process? What's your goal here? And when you're talking about a portrait, there's a lot of different things that would fit that description. And so I'm going to share with you what my thought is on that. And it's not the same all the time. It depends on what the goal is. For instance, if someone just wants a simple headshot for their LinkedIn profile, there's not necessarily a whole lot of thought and planning that goes into it. There's some, but not necessarily. It could be the most cut and dry, simple backgrounds, simple lighting that you can imagine. And then again, it could be a lot more than that. But when I'm thinking portrait, I'm thinking about portraying someone where I am telling their story. I'm sharing something about them that you can get just by looking at this image of them. And so I'm going to share with you my thoughts, my process on how I make that happen. Everybody's different. There's a lot of photographers who just show up and press a button, and they think because there's something special that makes it special, and sometimes that's the case. However, I feel like I can press the button just as well as the next person, and so I feel like I've got to do more. In fact, I look at it through the lens of if the neighbor can do it, then I'm not professional enough. And so, like, for instance, the neighbor can come over and photograph you in the backyard and make you look okay. I mean, the images are going to come out where the exposure is correct. Of course, exposure is one of 100,000 different combinations, but it's an important one. But automatic cameras in program mode or automatic mode do a pretty good job most of the time, 80% of the time, with lighting. So anyone who just shows up and presses the button, I don't think they're actually doing enough. That's just my opinion, though. Not everybody's going to agree with that, and their opinion is just as correct as mine, equivalent. I just have my opinion, and that to me is I have to do more than you're expecting. And so I'm going to define what a full service photographer is too, real quick. Full service just means you've gotten the product to the point where there is no more work left to do. So if you are a headshot photographer and your goal is to, let's say you just specialize in LinkedIn portfolio, LinkedIn profile images, then an end result is a digital file that's optimized for LinkedIn. That's the end result. No more work for them to do. I mean, yeah, they have to upload it, but that's not photography related. That's LinkedIn related. In other types of photography, for instance, I specialize in family portraits as home decor. If I gave someone a digital file, I'm giving them more work to do because family portraits are something special. They represent the love of the family. They're not supposed to just sit on a hard drive that's going to fail at some point. I had a hard drive fail just last week. They fail. Now, it was on my NAS, and so I had, it was redundant 4 times, and so 1 of 4 went bad. There were 3 that were just fine. So that's not like it's a problem. It's not a concern. But images just on a hard drive are not complete. They're not done just yet. So a family portrait completion means printed, framed, if that's part of the process, and not always, and then installed on the wall. That is full service, where there is nothing left to do. And so as a photographer, you create the image, and we're going to go over this in more detail. I'm just giving you this overall view of what a full service photographer does. A full service photographer shows the images in person. They do whatever artwork needs to be done, retouching. They send it to FinerWorks to get printed and probably framed as well. That's what I do. And then when you get it back from FinerWorks, you go and deliver it and install it on the wall of your client. That is full service. Anything less than that is not full service. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean good or bad. It's just not full service. It just doesn't fit the description, the definition. So, but all of that goes into why I choose to photograph and do the things I do, because I'm thinking about all the way through the entire process to the end. So there's nothing left for my client to do. And so that affects, and that has something to do with what I'm doing in the beginning, so that my process is smooth and easy all the way through for both myself and my client. So if you have that handout, perfect, great, follow along with me. If you don't, that's fine too. But we're talking about portraits, and we're talking about the planning process that will include posing, it'll include lenses, it'll include some other things. But the goal, I want you to create better photographs of family, friends, starting off with a mindset. Then we'll go into some advice on what lenses to use and some things to think about, how to situate the model, tips on how to light, but those are lightweight for this, and how to best flatter their features. So those are the things we'll be going over today. You know, a few years ago, it's been a number of years now, someone asked me, has the digital camera and cell phones hurt your business? I mean, cameras today, cell phones today are so good that I think most people just do it themselves. So that was the question that was posed. And that got me to thinking, well, why does someone hire a photographer? I mean, they were right in their question. Cell phones are really good. Digital cameras are really good. So what's the differentiator between a professional photographer and someone with a camera or just with their cell phone? It certainly isn't a logical or cost-cutting reason. It seems to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me that people hire photographers for emotional reasons and not logical ones. So because of this, I believe that it is our responsibility as portrait artists to make sure that our images say something to the viewer, that you're conveying a message of some sort. You've got to define what that is ahead of time, but you're conveying that message, that it has some type of emotional impact. I believe when we master this goal, that the images we create don't even fall in the category of pictures anymore. Certainly not photos or pics. They are now elevated to photograph or images. I sometimes call it images. People do take pictures. We as photographers, as portrait artists, no matter what your medium, we create images, we create photographs, and there's no doubt that this is art. So what do we need to do in order to create emotional photographs? I'll let you in on my secret. I call it the smile details technique. Now, SMILE is an acronym, SMILE, SMILE. Details isn't. There are 6 key factors when photographing portraits, and I call them the smile details. The S, and I'm going to go into more detail here in just a moment, but the S stands for storytelling. The M is microcosm. I, interaction. The L is love, but I also include emotion and energy in there. Love. And letter E is environment. And then the details. Now let's go over each one of those. S for storytelling. They have a story to tell. It doesn't matter who you are creating a portrait of, they have a story. And it is interesting to someone. And it is up to us to discover it or learn about it. We have to be good listeners. We also have to be good interviewers. It has everything to do with how they get, let's say it's a family. It has everything to do with how they get along with each other. Are they silly? Are they fun? Are they serious? What are they doing now? What are they proud of in their past? What do they see as potential for their future? Storytelling. The M, microcosm. I'm sure you know that that means little world. We all have our own little world, our own point of view. What's theirs all about? It takes questions. You're going to ask them questions to find out what their world is all about. And you're going to be listening about 80% of the time. Your questions take about 20%. What's their world all about? What do they do? What do they believe in? Their values? I, interaction. If this is a family, if this is a couple, you get to see them while you're visiting with them. So observe how they interact with each other. It reminds me of a couple several years ago. They just gotten engaged, so they were looking for a wedding photographer, and they came in and sat down on my couch. My office was on in San Antonio on Broadway at that time, so I guess more Alamo Heights, and then they came in and sat down on a love seat, and they were, a love seat is for two. I could have sat there with them. They were sitting so close. And then the next couple that came in sat on opposite. They were as far apart as they could. I could have sat in between them. And there's another couple that one sat on the love seat and one sat on the wingback chair. They really weren't all that close together. Maybe had an argument on the way in. I don't know. But their interaction plays a role, and not just that moment when you're there visiting with them and talking to them, but when you're actually photographing them. You're going to be during that process where you're talking to them about what's going on, that planning process. I want to know who they are. I want to know if public displays of affection are part of their world, or if they're totally against that. It plays a role in how I photograph them, how I convey who they are. My goal is not to create the most beautiful photograph I have the ability to, not that alone. That in combination with who are they and how can I convey that message? Because I don't need to convey my message. It isn't a portrait of me. I'm just the artist that's helping them do it. This is a collaborative piece. What I create is collaborative. I am working with the client. They get a say. Now, does that mean that's the only type of portrait work there is? Of course not. Of course not. There's plenty of times when I have photographed someone in the way I wanted to. I'm just not talking about that kind today. But that exists, and it has its place, and it's great. But if your goal is to create an image that portrays who they are, you need to know who they are. It's not simply about lighting techniques. While that does play a huge role, it's not the only role. We've gotten through S, M, and I. We're now at L for love. Love through their emotions, through their energy. What are they sharing? What are they showing? What are their eyes saying to each other? How do I want to convey that? What's the best location for me to convey these things? I keep seeing photographers post on Facebook, where's a good location for senior portraits? Where's a good location for family portraits? Where's a good location for this? Where's a good location for that? It makes me think that they don't understand the basic element of portraiture, and that's to convey their story. It's not about a pretty place. It's about conveying the story of the person you're photographing. In the planning process, when you're visiting with the people you're going to photograph, your questions and their responses and the things that they share with you, those will tell you the location. In addition to one other variable that that plays a role in my decision making, and that's I want to know where this photograph is going to be displayed when it's complete, because that location plays a role as well. So if I know it's going to go in the living room above the sofa, I can see the things that are around it. I can see the colors. I know exactly where it's going to be. And I even know what size it's going to be and the proportions, whether it's going to be vertical, whether it's going to be horizontal, because the space told me that. So it's all planned ahead of time. I have it in my mind ahead of time. I know what we're going to be doing. And that is the E for environment. The location, I know where it's going to be, but it also has something to do with, what do they enjoy? What do they do? What do they like? So maybe if it's a couple where we go to the place where he asked her to marry him, maybe that's the right place. It isn't always, though. During that conversation, a picture forms in my mind, and if it doesn't, that means we have more discussion to do. Again, it's not just about a pretty place. It's about conveying their story. And a pretty place might do that. And then again, it might not help tell their story at all. We may be thinking about what things that they enjoy doing. That may be the place that we go. So maybe they enjoy spending time at the lake. Maybe they are skydivers. Who knows? Maybe they like to skateboard. These different things help to tell me where this portrait is going to be created. Then we get down to the details. Hands, eyes, hair, expressions, possessions. A lot of things help tell their story. Hands together. Just different elements about hands. I photographed a family portrait. This was several years ago. And we did this in their home. And grandmother and granddaughter, it might have been great grandmother and great granddaughter. Both, I learned through conversation, both enjoyed playing piano. And so we got a photograph of just their hands on the keyboard. So I could see great grandmother's hands and great granddaughter's hands doing something that they enjoyed side by side. Talk about details. In order to be successful, though, with this method, you're going to be taking time. And some of you just don't choose to do that. And I understand. There's times when I don't have time either. If you're going to choose this method, you're going to invest the time, though. You have to do your due diligence. The design consultation, that planning session, I called it earlier. I call it a design consultation, but it's a planning session. That's the key. There is a story to tell. It has everything to do with how they get along with each other. Are they serious? Are they fun? Do they like sharp and clear images? Do they like soft and romantic images? There's not one that's better than the other, except in the specific. What do they like? What are they trying to convey? The design consultation is a meeting between you and your clients. Ideally, I like to hold it at the place where the photograph is going to be displayed. That's not always an option, but that's where I like to do it. So I can see the environment where this image is going to be displayed, where it's going to live. I want it to match that environment. I mean, I'm thinking it's much more important than the couch that's sitting there. The couch is important. I mean, you want to get the colors right. You want it to be just ideal for that space. But I'm thinking if it's a family portrait, it's much more important than the place you put your buns. So therefore, it deserves more planning, in my opinion. You get to know your client. You get to know their goals. You get to know the things they enjoy. You get to hear about their passions, how they interact. You get to see how they interact with each other. You get to see their environment. You get to learn what their world, their microcosm, is all about. You talk about what they want and expect in you and the photograph that you're about to create. And since you're planning in the place where the photograph is going to be displayed, you can plan for things such as color and tone matching. So it's perfect for its chosen location. You'll also choose the session location, the date, the time of the session based on their preferences. Time of day plays a role. You know it does. But did you know it does specifically to the environment it's going to be displayed in? It does. Now let's put all that information together with equipment, posing, lighting, in order to create a beautiful, emotional portrait. Let's talk about the technical side real quick. Lenses. What's the ideal lens for a portrait? There is no such thing as an ideal lens for a portrait. There may be a specific one for a specific purpose, but generally speaking, all lenses can be used to create a portrait. If I'm photographing an individual though, I want something that's telephoto. Now, what's the definition of telephoto? Anything great, if you've got a 35 millimeter, anything greater than a 50 millimeter. So a 60 millimeter and up. For me, somewhere between 60 and 135 millimeters. That to me is ideal. So you generally want a telephoto lens. And again, that's anything greater than 50 millimeters. By the way, telephoto does not mean zoom. Zoom means variable focal length, meaning I can change that zoom number, those millimeters, that 60 millimeter to 135, I can change it. I can zoom in. But a telephoto just means greater than normal, standard, which for a 35 millimeter, generally speaking, is a 50 millimeter lens. That doesn't mean always. There are times when I'm using a wide angle. It may be, and a wide angle is just any number lower than 50 millimeters. Again, for a 35 millimeter camera. For medium format cameras, that number changes. For large format cameras, that number changes. But most people are using a DSLR, digital single lens reflex camera, which is equivalent to the old 35 millimeters film. If I'm photographing a group, I might use the same range, but I also am likely to need a lower number, a wide angle. And that's because of distance. Depending on the size of the group, I may not be able to back up very far from them. So a wide angle lens may be absolutely necessary in that instance. The downside to a wide angle lens when you're photographing horizontal is the people who are on that edge have the potential to look wider than they actually are. And I know you don't intentionally want to make someone look wider than they actually are, wider, W-I-D-E-R, wider. We don't want them to look wider. People want to look skinnier. They comment about it all the time. But if you have to use that lens in order to get everybody in, that's what you do. Just make those people who put skinnier people on the outside. That way you can't really tell. Because those wider people, they're not going to be happy if you don't, if you keep them on the outside. So we choose the focal length based on what we're trying to accomplish, what we want this image to look like. I don't know if you've done any experiments with focal length, but you can totally change the way a scene looks without changing the size of the subject, but change the scene dramatically based on the focal length of the lens. In our Photo 101 class and in our lenses seminar or workshop, one of the things we do is, and I'm going to paint a scene for you. So I want to picture a subject. You picture a subject, and that subject is on the sidewalk. Let's just say on the sidewalk, facing their own home, and you have your back to their home. So the neighbor's house is what's in the background. And so let's say if you're photographing with a wide angle, uh, well, let's start off with a telephoto. So in both images, the subject is identical in size, meaning you will have to move closer or further away. If you're a telephoto, you'll be further away. If you're using a wide angle, you'll be closer to them. Because my goal in this particular scenario is to cause you to see the extreme amount of difference there could be in the scene, the background behind the subject. So in this experiment, I want you to keep your subject exactly the same size, meaning you will move closer if it's wide angle, you move further away if you're telephoto, and you do both. But then notice how different that background becomes. Let's say across the street is the driveway and the garage door. That's what's directly across, but you can see the whole house. You know, wide angle lens, you're going to see the whole house. You're going to see the driveway, the sidewalk, the roof, the trees, the landscaping. You'll see all of that. In the telephoto, you'll be zoomed in so close that it'll only be the garage door, those windows maybe. It'll look like they're standing right in front of that garage door rather than across the street on the sidewalk. The story changes dramatically based on the tools that you use. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. They're both right. They're just tools. You're using them to convey the message you're trying to convey. Simple as that. Just to make sure, focal length, whatever number your lens ends up on after zooming in, that's your focal length. If you don't have a zoom lens and you have a fixed focal length lens or a prime lens. Let's talk about posing for just a little while. When we're photographing groups, your goal is to make sure everyone's face is visible. And I think generally speaking, you know that. But I guarantee you have seen just as many group photographs as I have where people's faces are either partially or mostly missing. So I've got some suggestions on that. You know, if you've got some steps, it makes things better because then you can go up rather than out. So steps first. Now, when you're using steps, you're increasing the depth that you need to have in focus. So therefore, you're going to have to increase your f-stop number in order to accommodate that additional depth of focus that you need. Always focus on the front row. Always focus on the front row. And then choose your f-stop based on how thick, how much depth of focus you need. So if you have just 2 rows, you're not going to need to increase your f-stop very much, that f-stop number. If you have 5 rows, then you've got a good amount of depth that must be in focus. So therefore, you've got to raise that f-stop number to a much higher number. It also depends on how far apart those steps are. There's a lot of variables, but it's based on depth. The greater the depth, the greater the number of your f-stop in order to make sure everyone's in focus. Now, something that I hear this from photographers all the time, and I would consider it bad advice, but it's advice that actually makes sense. So I'll tell you why it's bad. Once a photographer gets everybody situated, they may, if it's a big group and they can't actually tell everybody where they need to be, they just say, make sure I can see you. They say, you know, put yourself in a position where you can see me, because if you can't see me, I can't see you. That sounds like good advice. It's bad advice. And the reason is because that person who's standing in front of you, I can still see the photographer, but half my face is gone if I'm standing directly behind someone. And so I have a rule for you: no stacking, no people stacking. That's the rule. Here's how to say it. Everyone stand directly in between the two people in front of you. If you're in the front row, don't move. Don't move. I also like to have shortest in front, tallest in back. That way there's less likely potential for people to cover someone up. Because if it's just the height of a step, some people are taller than that. So if you've got a tall person behind a short person, that step is not going to make enough of a difference. Tall people in back, short people in front. You may want to say vertically challenged if you're worried about what people may think. It's a fun way to say it. I say it myself. Tall people in back, vertically challenged in front, middle in the middle. Pretty simple. But I tell them stand directly between the two people in front of you. Because when you do that, I have a face here and a face here. Again, if it was over like this, I would lose half my face. But because you're standing directly in between two people, your face is totally visible. Stand directly in between the two people that are right in front of you. That's the instructions that I give when I'm photographing larger groups. Now, if it's a smaller group, a family group, I control that. I pose them. I put them in positions where I can optimize what they're looking like and what their pose, what their face, where their face is. It's only in larger groups that I would need to say something like that. A little more about posing. Some of us have a little extra right here, double chin. But we're not real interested in showing that off. Certainly don't want to highlight it. So what do you do? Well, if you're photographing individuals, ask them to lean forward just a little bit. Doesn't take much. Lean forward from your lower back, by the way. Lean forward from your lower back and slightly raise your chin. Now, it's going to happen anyway, simply because you're leaning forward. When you're pulled back like this compared to this, it's going to feel like you need to raise your head. So they'll probably do it without you having to say anything. But you do want to pay attention to it. They could overdo it. They could underdo it. You may also want to get a slightly higher angle than them. So instead of straight on, you may want to raise yourself a little bit. Raise your camera angle relative to them. So that's helpful as well. With individuals, generally speaking, straight on like I am right now is probably not the best. It depends on the individual, of course. But generally speaking, I want them to turn away from the camera just a little bit. It just changes the way you look. Now, is that better or worse? Well, that's personal opinion. You're the artist. You pose them the way you feel looks good. But I say turn the body a little bit away from the camera and twist at the waist to bring the shoulders and head back towards the camera. Not totally flat, but your body turns more than your shoulders do. So that's what I do for individuals. You've heard of masculine posing and feminine posing, and this is a thing. It doesn't mean that women don't look good in masculine posing, though, because they do. Men don't usually look good in feminine posing, though. It depends on the individual. When you get to know them, you learn things like that. One of the questions I asked during that planning session is, have you ever had a photograph created that you didn't like? And most people would say yes to that question. Can you tell me about it? Or even better, can you show me? Tell me what it is you didn't care for. When it comes to cropping, don't crop at a joint. Crop in between. Not at a joint. It elongates whatever that part of the body is. Don't crop at a joint. All right, moving to the next one. Lighting. I am moving through this kind of quickly, but lighting. You do understand, I assume, but I'll go into it a little bit, that ambient lighting or ambient exposure and flash or artificial lighting are totally separate things. So ambient lighting is just whatever exists in your environment. Ambient means existing lighting. It could be natural light. It doesn't necessarily have to be, though. It's just whatever's there. So therefore, even on a evening, the sun's already gone down, and you've got lights coming from some source, a street light, a light on a house or a building. That is ambient lighting. It's existing lighting. But let's say it's outside a beautiful sunny day. Does that mean you just never use your flash because there's enough light? That may be your style, so potentially, yeah. But it doesn't mean that, because I use a flash on a bright, beautiful sunny day to fill in the shadows that the sun creates. Because the sun often, based on the angle, will put shadows in your eyes based on the angle. Now, if you don't have a fill flash, then you're going to do something, maybe a reflector to help with that. And that's a very good solution. But the goal is, I don't want shadows where my eyes are supposed to be. I want to see people's eyes. I think they help tell the story. They convey who they are. Eye color, eye expression, eyelashes, eyebrows, everything in this part of the face and the rest of the face, but we're talking about this right now, incredibly important in conveying who they are. And you know that. Probably not getting any arguments on that one. Are there exceptions? Are there times when you want that to go dark? Sure. You want something totally dramatic? Of course. But if my goal is to portray them, I want to see their eyes. And so even on a bright, beautiful sunny day, I'm still using a flash. Now, you may not be able to tell when you look at my photographs, but I'll give you one tell, the highlight in their eyes. There's going to be a specular reflection of my flash. Even if you can't tell in anywhere else, you'll tell there. That's the tell. And I want it to be there. That's a sparkle. That's the 3D look. I think it looks good. Now, you all have seen images where someone's artificial lighting was too much. And I've even come across people who would say, I'm a natural light photographer because artificial lighting just doesn't look natural. Yeah, if you're doing it wrong, it doesn't look natural. But that would be equivalent to let's say you're a carpenter. And you're saying, you know what? I do not use hammers because hammers put holes in sheetrock. Do they do that? Yeah. Pretty easy to put a hole in sheetrock with a hammer. That's true. That's true. But does that mean you were doing it right? Well, if you're doing demolition, yes. But if you're not, it's not right. But is that the hammer's fault? Or is that the user's fault? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being a natural light photographer. Don't read that, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you say you're a natural light photographer because artificial lighting looks unnatural, you're incorrect. When used incorrectly, you're correct. But that's not how it's supposed to be used. That's why it's called incorrect use of the tool. And it isn't the hammer's fault for putting the hole in the sheetrock any more than it's the flash's fault for making the skin tones too bright. That is the user. If you think artificial lighting doesn't look good, it's because you haven't studied artificial lighting enough to actually control it and use it. And you see lots of examples of photographers that would fall in that category. They could use a little bit of help on that. By the way, nobody gets it right every single time. But when you know what you're looking for, you can tweak it to make it look like the way you want to, if you understand your tools. So take classes on the things you don't think you need. You'll be surprised. Watch YouTube videos. on things you don't think you'll need. You'll be surprised. Normally, your camera is attempting to take a picture, create an image of light that already exists in your scene. Meaning, if you do have a flash, it's not taking, your camera's meter is not taking that into consideration. By the way, your camera's meter is just reading the light that is being reflected off of surfaces. So it's tonal, it's effectively black and white and all the shades of gray. So your camera's meter reads shades of gray. It has no understanding of color at all. You know, just a few weeks ago, you may have seen lots of poinsettias because it's considered the Christmas plant because of its seriously saturated green lower leaves and seriously saturated red upper leaves. Now there's different varieties of those. I've seen the white ones and others as pink, but I'm thinking about the ones that are red and green. You can see that if you don't have any color deficiencies, you can see that as being a massive amount of contrast. Your camera's meter sees that red and that green as being identical tones because they reflect the same amount of light. So if you're photographing in black and white, that poinsettia that's red on top and green on bottom is gray all over and the exact same shade of gray. If you hadn't seen a poinsettia and you had not seen that plant, you would think that plant was just green leaves, the same exact color green. Because your camera's meter does not understand the color spectrum, the color wheel. We consider red and green to be opposites. Camera's meter has no understanding of that. Your camera's meter reads how much light's being reflected off of the surface. Ambient, not flash. Now, there are handheld meters where you can read flash, but the meter inside your camera is an ambient meter. What light currently exists. And if you're adding in flash, you're going to have to take that into consideration because your meter's not going to help you there. It helps you on the exposure of things that are being lit ambiently with the existing light, but it has no effect, doesn't show you at all what your artificial light is doing. And so if I'm photographing someone, I will get the lighting right for ambient first, and then I will add my flash in to fill the shadow. So I'll adjust that light to just give that little touch of light that I need in the right spots. And no, it has no effect. So if there's sunlight that's hitting me here and it's creating a shadow here, it has no effect where the sun is hitting me. It only has an effect where the sun isn't. It's not overpowering the flash. Now, the flash is not overpowering the sun. Now, there are instances where you do want to do such a thing. That's not what I'm currently talking about. Maybe in another episode, we'll talk about that, but that's not what I'm currently talking about. There are times when it's appropriate to overpower the sun with your flash. Right now, I'm just talking about fill flash. So again, your ambient lighting is the sun. It is the lighting that's in your environment. It could be a lamp, a street lamp. So while a flash tries to throw a certain amount of light onto the scene, remember that the exposure for the ambient light is controlled by your camera settings, the aperture, the shutter, ISO, while your exposure from the flash generally is controlled by how much light or power your flash outputs plus distance to your subject. For instance, if you have it set on a certain amount of power and you back it up, let's say it's 5 feet away and you back it up to 10 feet away. Even if you didn't change the power setting, you now have half the amount of light. So there's more than one way to get more or less light. It could be by moving closer or further away your light source. If you have a pop-up flash or an accessory flash that's connected to your camera, there's not a whole lot you can do because then it's connected to your camera. But a lot of us photographers like off-camera flash, and so those are separate. We can move the camera anywhere, but our lights stay right where our lights are supposed to be based on our goals, what we're trying to accomplish, the story that we're trying to tell. So again, ambient lighting is whatever lighting exists without adding any light to an environment. Fill flash is filling in the shadows that the sun creates. There are times when you are attempting to create an image that is beyond the dynamic range of the camera. By the way, as cameras get better and better and better, this becomes less and less of an issue. But older cameras, 5 years or more, all of them have this issue. Newer cameras, 5 years or less, some do, some of them don't, or have less of this particular problem. But dynamic range is just the amount of tones that are being brought in. Again, it's not color, just tones from the darkest shade of black to the brightest white. So this range and all the shades of gray in between. Your camera in any one exposure has a certain dynamic range from the dark shadows to the bright highlights that it can bring in any one image. Now, if you've heard of high dynamic range, it's when you create one that's further onto that shadow side or further onto the highlight side, and you merge those together to get the best of all of those different exposures. So effectively, you have a higher dynamic range, high dynamic range, HDR. With HDR, you generally are going to be creating 3 or more images, sometimes a lot more, but at least 3 different images usually. And you're combining those using software after you've created the photograph. Some cameras have that in them where you just tell it ahead of time. In fact, a lot of cell phones, that's just part of the deal. You can turn it off, but it's in the newest Apple phones. I think the last 2 generations, they came with HDR as the default. So if you don't want that every single time, you're actually going to have to turn it off. And all other cell phones, you have to turn it on if you wanted it. But it just increases the range of tones from darkest shadows to the brightest highlights. When you create an image, your scene usually has greater than just say 5 or 6 or 7 stops worth of light between the darkest shadows and the brightest highlights. That doesn't mean that those other things don't exist. It means that they get shoved into those sides, that solid black or the solid white. So this has the ability to extend that, to make it more of a dynamic range. When you are using your fill flash, you effectively are increasing that. That's not exactly what's happening in that instance, but you can start seeing it within that range. Otherwise, it might go into the shadow where you don't see any detail at all. Low light just means anything really less than sunlight. So when you're inside, and not including when you have a window with sunlight coming in, but when you're inside and there's not that window light bringing light in, you're in a low light situation. Once the sun has gone down, you're in a low light situation. You may be creating images with both your ambient lighting and your flash together. You may choose to do a technique called dragging the shutter, where you are purposefully choosing a longer shutter speed than you would otherwise choose in order to bring in more of the ambient lighting. If you're photographing a person, though, they need to have the ability to stand very still depending on that length of time. So if you've got it a second long, that may not seem like a long period of time, but for a photograph, it's pretty long. And it's too long to handhold. You'll need your friend, the tripod, so that your camera can be still even if you do have a longer exposure. When should you use your flash? When your subject, and because of shadows, when part of your subject needs more light. And I gave that example already with when the sunlight causes shadows in your eyes to fill in the shadows it created. That's a perfect example. By the way, the little pop-up flash on the cheaper digital cameras, that works pretty well when a subject's maybe 8-10 feet away and the sun is causing a shadow in their eyes. That pop-up flash does a pretty good job of solving that problem. That's about the only thing it does well. That's a pretty limited tool. Accessory flashes blow it away. Of course, they're not cheap. Unless you go with the Chinese knockoffs, those are pretty cheap. So let's review this real quick. In my opinion, it is up to you as the portrait artist to portray the subject you are working with, to tell their story. That is generalized. There are times when I tell the story that I want to tell. I create everything, the entire scene, the subject, and they effectively are just an actor in it. But in an image where my goal is to portray this individual, I want to know who they are. So I'm sitting down with them and I'm asking them questions, finding out who they are, what they're proud of in their past, what their values are, what they believe in, what they're currently up to. What's their vision of their future? What do they see for themselves? What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are things that they have done before, experienced? What are things that they still want to experience? In having this conversation in the place where they're going to be displaying this beautiful print that you're going to be sending off to FinerWorks and getting it framed and delivering it and installing on their wall. If you choose to go that far, you don't have to. I chose to do that, but you don't have to. It's one of my differentiators. It's one of the things that causes people to contact me. They're not looking for more work to do. When you hire a roofer, are you looking to put some of those shingles on? Of course not. You want them to do the work completely. I mean, to me, a photographer who does not complete the work, and complete again, is based on the job. If it's a LinkedIn profile image, then that's a digital file optimized for LinkedIn. That's done. That's complete. That's full service. If it's a family portrait winds up on someone's wall. It's not equivalent to a LinkedIn profile image. It's got a lot more value because it's a photograph that represents the love of a family. Totally different purpose, totally different reason. So it winds up on the wall. For that, full service means get it printed, get it framed, and get it installed. And I generally do that myself, the installation. I sometimes do hire that out, depends on what I'm trying to accomplish or where it's going to be displayed. And generally, I just do it myself. And FinerWorks has a great selection of frames, and so they just make they make the process so easy, and it's quick. So it's not like I have to tell my client that, all right, it's going to be like 6 to 8 weeks. It doesn't take that long. I mean, if you're going super slow and taking your time with doing your artwork, I guess it could, but geez, not how it works. You get it in a timely fashion. And so there's all kinds of advantages with that. So we are going through this process of talking to our client, visiting with them, and in my opinion, in the place where it's going to be displayed. Finding out who they are, seeing the environment it's going to be displayed in, and sit for years to come. I want them to cry tears of joy every time they see it. And I feel like I have a better chance of making that goal happen when I know very well who it is I'm photographing, when I take the time to get to know them. At that point, we plan at the end of the planning session. By the way, that's when I get my creation fee or my session fee, is at the end of that planning session. We put on the books the session, the date of the session itself, when we're going to do the art, create the art, the photograph, and the date of the, when we look at the photographs, I call it a portrait selection consultation, where I show them a handful. I don't show them every single image I create. I'm not trying to waste their time. I know which images are going to look best for the purposes that they shared with me. So why would I waste my time with everything that I create? Also, I create a very small number because I know my goal. I know my job. I understand the assignment. The assignment is not to create as many images. Press the button as many times as you possibly can, or put it on that auto setting where the drive just keeps on. Come on, portrait photographers, don't do that. You're wasting your time. One image. Get what you want and get out of there. I mean, when it was film days, you did it in rolls of 12, 24, and 36. And if you could get it in that roll of 24, you weren't going to add in another roll to get one or two more. You were going to get it within 24. Now that we don't have that kind of limitation, you think that 240 is the right number? 500? I came across yesterday a client who told me about a photographer they worked with doing their family portrait, and they shared 1,000 images with them. That's ridiculous, guys. Get it together. You have a job to do. Your goal is to portray something, learn what it is that they want, and give it to them. It's not that hard. It's actually a whole lot easier than creating 1,000 images. By the way, I've never heard that number before. That's an extreme, and I'm sure that probably only happened once to that person, and that person probably knew that themselves that was overkill and ridiculous, and probably have gotten it together since then. We learn from our mistakes, and we all make them. I've probably made more than my fair share, but I've learned from them, hopefully. But we set the date at the end of that consultation when I've got a picture in my head and I've described what we're going to do. We're excited about the photography session. We set the date. We set the date of the portrait selection consultation. When we're doing the session itself, I'm talking to them. I'm sharing with them. This is the one that you said that Grandma would want. She's going to love this image because Grandma's going to want one probably of the grandkids. So we create one for her. We talked about it ahead of time. During the planning session, we talk about every single different variable combination they may want. It's a whole lot easier to sell something when you've got nothing to sell. Besides, you need to know what it is that they want. So find out and give them that. Give them exactly that in the best way you have the ability to do. So during that session, I'm talking about that I share with them when we have accomplished something that this is the one for the wall. It's beautiful. It's amazing. You are just going to love this. That way this is the truth. I go until I get that feeling, and then I share that feeling with them. And then at the portrait selection consultation, I'm showing them just the ones that they need. Now, I may show maybe 2 or 3 of the same one, but I'm not going to show them 15, 20 of the same exact image. I know which image is going to look best in the location that they want to have this displayed. I'm only going to show them the cream of the crop. Not every single time I press the shutter button. No one needs that. It's too time consuming. I care way more about their time and my time to do that to them. I consider it rude. You may not. I absolutely consider anything that takes more of their time than necessary is rude and uncaring. Roaming around a park, crossing your fingers, oh, we get a better picture over there. Poor planning causes that. That's not a benefit. If you think your clients appreciate you spending another half hour, an hour to hopefully get a couple more good ones, you might get lucky and there's a couple in there that they actually do like. But it means you didn't care about their time because you didn't plan it. Plan it. Know what you're going to do and make sure that happens. So at that portrait selection consultation, they choose the ones that they want. They choose the print surface, whether it's a canvas or whether it's regular print, or a traditional print. We talk about the frames, and the way I do the frames might be a little bit different. And I'll share that with you real quick. So some photographers will bring in frames, or maybe they'll bring in those little sample corners. I never wanted to have anything to do with that. That just seemed like too much. And they have enough to make a decision just on my photographs. I really don't want them to have to go through all that. And so when we're looking through those photographs, I'm in their home. I'm projecting. I've got a projector. I'm projecting it in the space where they're going to be seeing the photograph, so they can see it in the size that I think is the right size for that spot. And I tell them, once we have narrowed that down, I know the perfect frame for this photograph and this space. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to frame it. Now, obviously, I'm not going to pay for your frame. You're going to be paying for it, but I'm going to get it framed for you. And when I come in here and install it, leave it up for a week, 2, 3, a month. Keep it up until you decide this is actually what I want. And if you feel like this is not the right frame for this photograph or your decor, then we'll replace it. If there's a difference in cost, if it costs you, the one you want costs more than the one I chose, okay, maybe you'll pay a difference in that price. But other than that, there's no charging you for it. So I guarantee the frame because I'm choosing it. No one has asked me to switch the frame. Not a single person. Hadn't happened. Not yet. Knock on wood. It makes it so much easier. They at that point already respect you and your opinion. They see you as an expert. So therefore, they're going with the expert point of view, the artist's choice. After all, they're the artist. They're the creator. They would know what's the best frame for this environment and this photograph. So yeah, that works. And it's all the way around. It works well for me. So that's how I choose to do that. So at that point, once we've chosen what we want, I come back to my office. I set up and I do the fine tuning and anything they have requested, I'm doing. So there's things that I take care of just anyway. So getting rid of pimples. That's part of the deal. Flyaway hairs to some degree. Sometimes flyaway hairs actually look good, but flyaway hairs, redness in the eyes, puffiness around the eyes, or anything that is temporary, I generally take care of. Anything that's permanent, I could minimize it, but I generally don't get rid of it. They would have to request it. But I don't want something to become the subject of this portrait to too much of a degree. So I do sometimes reduce something, reduce the spot or the redness. If someone has some redness, I consider that temporary. So maybe they've been out in the sun too long. If their ears are red, it may be because the sunlight is passing through them. And so I'm going to take care of that redness. So there's certain things that I just do normally in that post process when I'm actually fine tuning those images and preparing them, optimizing them for print and sending them over to FinerWorks. Once I use I call them art cards. So I have art cards where I write down what it is I'm going to do. If there's any notes that I need to take about what I'm going to be doing, I write those on the back, and those all go into my binder, my little mini binder, and these represent what step they're in throughout the process. So there's that, but that's old school. There's software programs that can help you with that. So use the software, not the old school stuff that I use. I'm just used to that. I've been doing this for a long time. I started my business in 1991. I started full time as a photographer in 1991, but at first I was working for other photographers. I started Landish Photography in 1995, but I did part-time work beginning in 1983. I didn't become full time until 1991, right after I graduated from college with a degree in photography. So that's part of my story. So those are the things that I recommend for your portrait planning process. And I definitely recommend, no matter what type of whatever your medium is, if your goal is to portray someone, get to know them. Go through these steps. Find out who they are, what it is you can do or say about them. You may choose just to find out what it is that they like. There's some sessions where we instead, because there was a different goal, where I had them go to Pinterest.com, create a board and do a search of different things that they like, and then make a board, and they share that board with me and we discuss the board. They like this about that image, they like that about this other image. I also want them to include some images they don't like. I want them to share with me the things they don't like in addition to the things that they do. So that's another way that we plan, but it's all in here. It's all the mindset. So once I know what they want, now I know what I need to do to create it. And that's what I recommend to you guys. I've had my camera off this whole time, so I'm looking. I just turned it not off to you guys, off to me, because I'm looking at my notes and not me. But I see James there in his cool beard and his nice hat. How's it going, James?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good.
We haven't had much chance to talk yet this year, have we?
Well, it's only 6 days, so
yeah,
I think that's a good reason.
Yeah, I think the beard's going to probably be gone pretty soon. I'm starting to get tired of it.
Gone or just trimmed short?
Haven't decided yet.
To be determined. Get it
Yeah.
at that length where it starts being really itchy. Don't do
Well,
that.
it's way past that now. It's yeah. Yeah. So yeah, well, I appreciate all the information that you've covered. Sorry, Melissa. Melissa had a
Oh yeah,
anyone that's going to be
I
watching
I
later
know
on.
what she's dealing
She
with.
had to
So
step out for family emergency.
mhm.
But yeah, I guess what time do we have right now?
It's 5:07.
Oh, 07. And we started at so we
4.
yeah, so I don't know. Did you have anything more you wanted to share, or do you think that about covered it?
Well, I think I covered it. Unless you have some thoughts or questions, any clarification or something you might want. My dog is trying to get my attention. Hi, buddy. Hi.
Yeah. So I'm not able to get into YouTube right now to see what the questions are, but I do know that Melissa's monitoring those.
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
she's
just in
planning
case there was a question. Okay.
yeah, so she's planning on going back and I believe try to answer some of those questions within the comments
Makes sense.
later on. So we may cut this short today. The funny thing is with start of February, or I'm sorry, start of January, January is always kind of just a little slower than normal. I may have gotten a text from
Well, I would assume your December is crazy. That's a popular time for people to be ordering prints from you, and you're shipping those out. So I would assume definitely that it's a busy time of year for you.
yeah, we were quite busy. We had an unusually high number of photographers utilizing us, more so than average. I mean, we do cater a little bit more to artists than traditional artists and digital artists than we do to photographers. And so it was we did see a substantial increase in just in fine art photographers. And that seems to be continuing that trend, and we continue to be busy even after Christmas, which is good,
Nice.
Because in the past it's usually not the case, but we do seem to be entering into 2022 fairly strong. So so anyway, so what is next month's topic? I suspect we're going to have more participants next month. We had our first Tuesday, and it was a little slower as well. So, but we expect February things should start to we should start to see some more participation. But what are you anticipating for next month?
I don't know. We can discuss that and come up with something, though.
Yeah, okay.
If I don't believe that I had already discussed that with Melissa. I think she asked, but I don't think I answered the question yet. But what kind of is there something in particular that you would personally be interested in?
Well, I would like to find out what our users are interested in on the photography side. Maybe we can approach it from that direction. We can put out a quick survey or a little survey that post it on through our newsletter, as well as on Facebook, and get an idea as to maybe we say, okay, give us your top 3 choices, just what you would like to see or covered when it comes to photography topics.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of see, okay, how can I'll present those to you and see what we can come up with. I know you have a ton of different classes that you have put together already. but maybe this year we try some also going to some topics that well, you might have a class for it, but go into some topics that you normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
People normally.
Yeah, that's good. I'm good with that.
Yes. So with that said, I guess we'll go ahead and close it out early.
All right.
And let's see. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. And this will be, I mean, some valuable information on posing, on really kind of prepping for portraits, because I think a lot of people that are new to photography have no clue what's involved with portrait photography. And this was really just more or less just kind of almost a quick introduction, because that topic is so in depth and is so detailed that I think there's so many different aspects that can be covered within that particular topic alone. Everything from how to dress, to well, I mean, we have people, not we, but I mean, there are people out there that their full-time job is to apply makeup for photography sessions.
That's right.
And so, and there's all these different things. One thing that really interests me is posing for fine art. And what I mean by that is posing for like the painter.
Totally different thing.
Yeah.
But the basics are still the same, because you care about lighting.
Yeah, and a lot of painters, they don't paint live subjects. They paint from
photographs
that they took. And so if you're wanting to become a portrait artist, hey, that's great if you can, get someone to stand there for hours. But a lot of, that it's a lot easier on the person, especially if they're paying you to paint their portrait. They're not going to want to stand there for hours.
No.
So a lot of times you're going to want to capture the photograph and utilize that as the reference for painting that portrait. So it's to me, it's portrait photography, portraiture in general is a fascinating topic. It's not easy. But it doesn't have to be that hard either.
Right.
So anyway, so I would I'll follow up with you later on, and I'll let you go ahead and end this meeting.
All right.
And we definitely appreciate your time, because these sessions really get a lot of interest, after the fact. Even if there's not a lot of participation immediately during.
Yeah, that happens a lot with lives.
Yeah, it's great content. And so anyway, well, so I'll go ahead and let you close the meeting, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, James.
All
well,
right.
Thank you guys for watching this month's episode of the Photo Tips Monthly. Definitely encourage you guys to reach out and take advantage of what FinerWorks has to offer, including the framing, because they make it just so darn easy that you don't have to do that part. I mean, I've come across photographers many times who say, first, I don't print because I don't know what's involved. It sounds like it's over. It sounds like there's too much work involved in it. It's not hard, guys, and you get to control your art. So if you believe what you have is art, then you be in control of the printing of it. And when it comes to the framing, you guys at FinerWorks make it so easy. You just pick the frame. You can see the you have it set up with your software where you can see the frame, your image in the frame. I mean, how much easier can it get? And then it adds another day or two. It doesn't even add that much more time to it to be able to do that. And so
the price points a lot less than your
custom framing.
your
Yeah,
local frame shop, and
that's
it's the
exactly
same
right.
frames. We use the same suppliers.
So I definitely recommend you guys take advantage of this. I mean, I haven't seen an easier solution,
Yeah.
and I've been doing this for a good number of years.
Sure.
And so FinerWorks makes it easy. I think that others are looking to FinerWorks for inspiration, because I do see others that have added these other labs who do try to add this. But what I see when they do add it is less selection and longer turnaround times. So it makes me think
Yeah.
like they send it to you to get it done, and it's just the shipping
So,
time to get it back to them.
yeah. Uh, some do. Some
Yeah,
do. Yeah. Actually, many do. So it's yeah. We are a while we offer picture framing as an add-on to your prints, or as something to be included with your prints, we also do a lot of large scale fulfillment, which it's getting a little bit more difficult because of the shortages of molding and getting
yeah.
many of these frame moldings are made overseas, but we're managing to, we order a little bit more than most places probably to try to, offset the
To
chance
minimize that problem.
of
Yeah.
running out. But yeah, it's a little, it has some interesting challenges that I could go on for an hour and a half on.
I bet. I'm not surprised by that at all.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's fantastic. So yeah, you guys take advantage of it. I mean, it just doesn't get any easier than this. And so for Jim Landers of Landers Photography School, and James and Melissa of FinerWorks, thank you guys for being here, spending your time with us, investing your time and improving your art. And you know what? I believe that because you're spending this time, that you are uplifting the entire creative community. And so thank you for uplifting others just by doing things that help yourself, because people are looking to you. They do look at you as an example, and when you are learning and doing things and growing, they glean a little bit of that as well. Thank you guys for
sure.
being here
Yeah.
today. Talk to you next time. Bye
Talk to
bye.
you later.